continue where we left off in the middle of Chavav. If you could see, it's just about 2/3 off the first page in the 26th chapter. So the Alter Rebbe says that even someone has all the facts laid out right, everything we learned, and he has the whole entire manual, and he knows how to follow it perfectly, and not only knows how to follow it perfectly, he has the koach, he has the energy, the spiritual, godly force and energy in order to follow this in a correct manner. Yet, if he won't do it, if he won't have the sense of elation and joy and feeling of triumph and victory in his battle, he will probably succumb to the Yetzer Hara. And he gives an example, like two people which are battling one with each other, so one might have the might and the other one doesn't have the adequate might or as much might in order to move on and to be victorious in his battle, in his wrestle. But if one, even the mightier one, is lazy and down in spirit and melancholy, if you will, he will lose that wrestle, lose that battle. Therefore, in Avodas Hashem, it's very important that we do our service with 100% simcha, joy, says psichut halev, openness of the heart, as opposed to timtum halev, the blockage of the heart, when the heart becomes like a stone. It has to be with haste, has to be with joy, has to be in an upright spirit for one to be victorious, to win over his animal soul, to win over his Yetzer Hara. That's basically which the Alter Rebbe began the chapter. We did give a little bit of a introduction, or we did note a few of the points that the Alter Rebbe brings later in the Tanya, which the Alter Rebbe in these very chapters says there are reasons in general in one's life why he has problems, in other words, what interferes in his joy and upright or uplifted spirit. Unfortunately, there's material sorrow and pain and challenges which one could have, which can bring a person down, or sometimes spiritual challenges someone might have in his or can have in his Avodas Hashem, in his service to God. So aren't there reasons? A person doesn't choose to be sad, a person doesn't choose to be down, a person doesn't choose to be melancholy. These are certain circumstances which come, God forbid, they shouldn't come, which unfortunately sometimes they come in a person's way, and therefore this causes his spirit, these challenges to, he's challenged by these challenges which overtake his spirit. So what do you do with them? I mean, it's nice to say that you must be besimcha, you must be joyous, and you must be up and have an upbeat in your service to God in order to triumph. It's wonderful to say so, but yet, how do we deal with these unfortunate realities which sometimes can come in the way which could be challenging and sometimes very challenging, and they have the ability to overtake the spirit of the Jew and consequently interfere with this victory which a Yid always has to have over the Yetzer Hara. And again, the Alter Rebbe says it's so crucial and important that he stands with simcha. What does he do with all these realities? And therefore, in this chapter and the following two chapters, the Alter Rebbe points out, deals with every single issue could come a person's way, may it be spiritual, may it be physical, may it be spiritual, and deals with them and responds to them. And the person, if we meditate on these points the Alter Rebbe is conveying to us and see the truth, the emes of this information, the Yid has the ability to overcome them, hence stand within a constant state of joy and uplifted spirit in order for him to overcome and be in triumph on a constant basis, on a constant basis, continuous basis, to overcome his Yetzer Hara. And the Alter Rebbe is going to explain again, going to deal with each individual issue, which can again material, spiritual, etc. But before the Alter Rebbe goes on, the Alter Rebbe demonstrates this point over here, where we see again in our Avodas Hashem and our service to God, how the essentiality of simcha, of joy. And he brings a pasuk. It says, b'chol etzev yeh meisar, that in every sadness or state of melancholy there is meisar, which seems to be an advantage. The word meisar could be like a yitaron. There is an advantage which perhaps could connote that there is a etzev mitzad, so that it could perhaps she is a yisun maila mizeh. It seems that there is a certain virtue in sadness, and there's a certain advantage in etzev in sadness. But that's when, which again can be translated. The word in these words, b'chol etzev yeh meiser, can translate this notion that there is an advantage in etzev, in sadness or melancholy. The Alter Rebbe said, read the words right. You will see quite on the contrary. Hine adrab, quite on the contrary. Miloshen zeh, from this expression, mashma is indicative. Sha'etzev mitzad atzmei ein b'mayla, that sadness, depression on its own, does not have a virtue, any virtue, or sadness on its own does not have any virtue. Rak sheyagia v'yove mimenu eze yisrin. Something could come from it. An advantage, a virtue can come from it. B'chol etzev yiyeh meiser. Yiyeh meiser doesn't say that the etzev itself, the sadness, is meiser, has a virtue, has an advantage. It's yiyeh meiser. Yiyeh meiser means something good could come out of it. That itself connotes that the etzev itself is something negative, and as the Alter Rebbe just pointed out, it's one of the greatest disturbances and obstacles in our Avodas Hashem when we feel down. Because again, as he gave the example, when two people wrestle, it's not enough one has greater might. It's important that the person's upbeat and he doesn't succumb to his laziness, to his downness. And what is it? What is the advantage which comes subsequent or consequent to the etzev? It's asimcha mitis, the true joy, Hashem elokov, in Hashem, one's God, haba achara etzev, in God, in Hashem, again, Hashem, one's God, which comes after, subsequent to that sadness, which is not stama sadness, but ha'amiti, a true state of bitterness and sadness. But it's not the norm. It's leitim mizumonim, which means periodically, infrequently, particular times that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, yes, we have to reflect on certain misdoings, misconducts, unfortunate deeds or thoughts or speech. Generally, we ought to reflect and retrospect on our sins, and that for that there are particular times. It's not the norm. It's not something which we have to constantly do. Quite on the contrary, we're on the battlefield. There's no time to reflect. Imagine someone on the battlefield and he's going to reflect on past mistakes that he made. He will definitely would be a great contributor to succumbing or to the victory of the enemy. On the battlefield, you're fighting. On the battlefield, you have to be with an up spirit, and you have to be with an uplifted spirit on the battlefield, and you have to fight with motivation and vigor and enthusiasm. There's no way on the battlefield to sit and reflect of different errors that you made in the past. But at times, and similarly, when a person is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's on the battlefield, he or she is on the battlefield, it's important that they're vigorous and they're fierce and again, which takes an uplifting of the spirit to be confident and to be secure and certain, and with an important upbeated spirit in order to triumph the Yetzer Hara. That's the norm. Periodically, because the person has certain follies and certain sins, which he did, there's certain times which the person has to be atziv, has to express them, but not stam atzvus like melancholy or depression, but bitterness. This is more the genuine type of atziv. It's not atzvus like we know it is, because atzvus is sadness or depression. That never leads to anything good, as Alter Rebbe will explain later. We're talking about true, genuine, authentic type of expression of atzlus, but not atzlus, sadness, more bitterness. Or the right word would be, the Alter Rebbe used the word b'mar nafshi, the bitterness of his heart. Later, one of the prakim after says, atzlus, sometimes the person is utzav, he's sad, he's depressed. There's no vitality there. A person sometimes can't even cry if he's, the difference of, the Alter Rebbe explains the difference of miridus and atzlus, bitterness or melancholy or depression. A person is depressed, he can't even cry. He doesn't move forward. He sits like a glump in one place, like a piece of clay rather, in one place. There's no life, there's no vitality. As opposed to someone's bitter, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of vitality. The fact that he could pour his heart in tears and in weeping and in crying, that shows there's a lot of energy. So that type of otsev exists in our Avodas Hashem, but again, it's not the norm. It's iti muzamanim, special or specific times when the person is again reflects on his sin with the bitterness of his soul, v'leiv nishbar, and a broken heart, with a broken heart, the spirit of impurity is as well crushed and broken. The spirit, as we learned in the previous prakim, especially in the end of Yud Zayin, Alter Rebbe deals with it in the Geras HaTshuva, one of the compartments of Tanya, that the person through his sin, he causes a partition, and he causes even the expression mechitza shel barzel, a partition of metal between him and his Creator, which again, this is what transpires when, God forbid, a person sins. How do you bring down that wall? How do you bring down that partition? So he said, what bring down that partition is when a person has a leiv nishbar, a broken heart. The famous expression, I believe it was the Ruzhiner, I recently heard it from another tzaddik, there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. Which is, play on words, or so beautifully and poetically said. There's nothing more whole than a broken heart, because a broken heart has enormous power. For that matter, even in one's relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it says Sharei D'mois Leininalu. Certain gates in the time, as a result of the package of exile, certain gates were closed, and not necessarily, we don't have that equal entry into them like in the time we had a transparent relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an open relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Shari D'mois Leininalu, the gates of tears were never closed, and through tears a person could pierce through important areas within HaKadosh Baruch Hu's domain in order to elicit this which bothers him. And that's why it says we have to be careful never to bring any person into tears, because has the expression oy vavoy, we should chas v'shalom, because a person cries because of you, chas v'shalom, another person, a yid or another person cries because of you, it can have chas v'shalom severe consequences, because the gates of tears have not closed, which shows again the power of cries, the power of tears. One of the things, again, that's between man and his Creator, and the person pours his heart out to his Creator, and again that opens important doors, as opposed to other doors, like we just said, opposed to other doors which are closed in the time of exile. But here also the power of tears has the ability to crush the walls, to bring down those walls and those partitions, which sometimes mechitza shel barzel, the Chazal tell us. They're partitions of metal where the person surrounded himself in is, again, which doesn't allow him to easily connect to his Creator, or doesn't allow him to connect to his Creator. These are levels of impurity which surrounded the person as a result of his sins, especially grave sins, which the Torah, the Talmud deals with. So how do you bring down those partitions? One of the ways the Torah promises us, based on the famous kapitel or chapter of Tehillim, that leiv nishbar v'nitke elikim le'sivze. It's the broken heart, it's the tears which bring down, melt away those partitions, those walls which man has created between him and his Creator. So at times, periodically, someone does have to express a leiv nishbar v'nitke, or express himself through a broken heart, and he says to cry b'mar nafshi, with a bitterness of his heart, bitterness of his soul, in a broken heart, and through this nishbara ruach hatuma v'sitra achra, the spirit of impurity is broken, or mechitza shel barzel, and what comes down is again that metal partition, hamafsekes, which divides beinei lav v'shebashamayim, between him and his Father in heaven. Like it says in Zohar, Zohar explains the pasuk ruach nishbara leiv nishbara, again this above mentioned chapter, the 51st chapter in Tehillim, where David HaMelech said, which which was one of his, as the Gemara says, Heikim Eila Shel Tshuva, he erected, he established the structure of tshuva, of repentance, and it's very much encapsulated in that famous chapter, Psalms 51, which he says, Ruach Nishbar, Lev Nishbar, Venit Lev Nishbar, the virtue of the broken heart. And again, as the Zohar explains, that the broken heart melts away that wall, that partition which man has created between him and his Creator. So when one utilizes the times which is given to him to reflect in retrospect on his sins and understands what the consequence of his sin, what he has done, and the partitions which he created and he erected between him and his Creator, and with this in itself is a reason for him to melt away in tears, and again works, and he understands what he's God forbid achieved, or what he's accomplished through his sins, which that itself brings him to a state of a broken heart and bitter tears, and those very bitter tears bring down that wall and that partition. And these are times which are given to the Yid. It says a time of Krish Mishalamit, in the end of the day, before a person goes to sleep and ready to start his new shlichus, his new important shlichut, his mandate, the way it'll be expressed in this world again, in his unique shlichus in this world, his mandate in this world, the way it'll begin and be expressed in the following subsequent day. So he makes a calculation of the entire day. How did I do? And if he's honest with himself, he knows, he brings up to mind this which he was inconsistent with, maybe in the positive mitzvahs, or God forbid, in the negative mitzvahs, he violated, maybe in action, maybe in speech, maybe in thought, his eyes, his ears, and so on, what he allowed himself to be aware of, and so on and so forth. And that's a special times, it said, that the person, when it comes to Krish B'Shalamita, that he has to reflect in retrospect on his actions during the day, and at times it would express itself, again, especially as he knows what these sins have accomplished, and consequently, he would express himself in a bitter manner. That's a good thing. But that's not the ultimate purpose. This is what the pasuk says. B'chol etzev yiyeh meiser. If he'll properly say Kriyash Mashalamita and properly retrospect in his days and the action, the thought, speech, and action of the past day, and perhaps express himself with a bitter heart and a bitter spirit and a broken heart, from there, the pasuk says, as the pasuk says, as the lashon of Yiyeh meiser, and again going back to the pasuk, that's right there, the beginning of the pasuk will be fulfilled, which says Tashmiyeni sasn simcha, as David HaMelech says in the very chapter which he laments on his sin, and he speaks about the broken spirit, a broken heart. In the same chapter it says, Hashem, bring me into the spirit of joy and elation. Because David HaMelech himself is saying that this is just a jump board, a springboard, in order that the person should be able to do his service, to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and to be on the arena, to fulfill his godly mission and mandate in this world through sasan v'simcha, through the joy and elation, which, as we mentioned before, is not only crucial, it's essential and vital that the person stands with sasan v'simcha just to triumph the Yetzer Hara. And God forbid, if he doesn't have that, he would almost inevitably succumb to the Yetzer Hara. So David HaMelech is saying there are times there is a ruach nishbar, a lev nishbar, a broken spirit, a broken heart, but and that's the kol atzev, but yiyeh meisar is referring to what it says in the beginning of the pasuk, Tashmein sasan v'simcha, Hashem, introduce me, bring me into the spirit of elation and joy. Or the pasuk itself says, Hashiva lisasei nishecha, David HaMelech says, bring me back, return me the joy of your deliverance. V'ruach nedivas ismecheni, and a spirit of nedivut of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the benevolence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sismecheni, support me. And with this, and again, this is what David HaMelech is saying, the importance, and again, the essentiality of being constantly with joy and elation, because David HaMelech understood that despite there are times that a person reflects on his sin, but that's just the atzev which ultimately will bring to the norm in a person's struggle or triumph, or his avodas Hashem is in implementing his mandate in avodas Hashem, and again, which is demanded so much, the uplifted spirit, joy and elation. And this is the reason. This is the reason why the Arizal established to say this very solemn after the Tikkun Chatzot, which again, for those of you who don't know what Tikkun Chatzot, the Tikkun Chatzot is not something that, they say, we don't know who says it, we don't know who doesn't say it. It's printed in the Siddur, which is the kosher Jew. And I don't mean to say to the exclusion of any other Jew, we're all kosher, but the focus Jew understands about it reflects and is able to reflect on the gullus of the exile, not only of Am Yisrael, and not only of the overall state of Yidden and Yiddishkeit. Ultimately, the gullus, it's an exile on the Shekhinah itself. The divine presence is in gullus, and the Tikkun Chatzos deals with the different dimensions of this whole of Galus, of exile, the way it reflects on Am Yisrael, on Eretz Yisrael, and the Beis Hamikdash, and ultimately on the divine presence itself. As we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, together with Jewish people, went into Galus. And Tikkun Chatzos are different. It's divided in different verses and sayings, and which deal with this unfortunate reality of Galus. So the Arizal, which is again, it's printed in any siddur, anyone could say it. I remember once a mashpia told me, one of my mentors said, we were speaking about who says Tikkun Chatzos. He says, do you think when someone says Tikkun Chatzos, he puts a sign out of his window and says, I'm saying Tikkun Chatzos? He says, there's those people who say it without any publicity. And quite on the contrary, somebody who's not interested in publicity, he has it's more probable that he is saying Tikkun Chatzos, which is again, there's those people who say it every night, those people who say it once a week, but it's a very enormous...
Is it done at midnight?
Sorry?
Is that done at midnight?
Yes, midnight. And again, the Gemara brings different reasons why this... or it's brought in a number of places, and why midnight, again, it corresponds to what transpires in the heaven above at midnight, which is a perfect time to elicit redemption from HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that time. So the Arizal established to say this solemn after this Tikkun Chatzos. Now, the Tikkun Chatzos... What?
Is it a Psalm?
This is same 51.
Oh, is it
same 51? And why? Yeah, Psalm 51. And why did he establish it? Because Tikkun Chatzos, especially when you read it and you understand what's behind this Tikkun Chatzos, based on what we just explained, it was done with a lot of tears, because if someone really feels and can appreciate and comprehensively appreciate the gullus, the layers of exile, which reach to the divine presence himself, the Shekhinah itself, it evokes from the person a true leiv nishbar, a broken heart and a broken spirit. So the Arizal, because he knew that ultimately the point is not to remain with the broken heart or the broken spirit. The point is to take the energy which exists in that utziv, in that true bitterness, and that genuine bitterness of the soul, and generate it. It should spill over, and it to be generated into the subsequent serving of Kodesh Baruch Hu, which again, by the way, those people who said Tikkun Chatzos, what they used to do is not from Tikkun Chatzos back to bed, because like I say, with such a important experience, to go from there into bed, this doesn't seem right, doesn't resonate. So what they used to do is after Chatzos, they sat down with a Gemara or anything else, learning Torah, and they continued learning Torah. And it was a few hours. Many of them learned till the morning. So the Arizal says right now is a good time to say this kapitel. The Arizal in other words, the Arizal established to say this psalm at that time, because the Arizal, the message that Arizal was trying to convey, you finished Tikkun Chatzos, it was expressed in the appropriate way Tikkun Chatzos is supposed to be expressed. And obviously, again, dealing with these sensitive issues or sensitive ideas, notions which Tikkun Chatzos deal with, which is the gullus, the different layers of exile and different dimensions of exile, which naturally, by a healthy person saying Tikkun Chatzos, it comes with a broken spirit and a broken heart. That is to say right now that's all, because your subsequent learning ought to be besimcha. It has to be with joy and elation and gladness of heart. Because Avodas Hashem, in order even to learn the subsequent Torah, it's important that you stand in an uplifted spirit. Even that, not only the next day when you're out there in the world and you need to overcome other challenges, it's important, it's crucial and essential that the person stands with this uplifted spirit. As we all know, it's simcha. It's important not to be down, and not to be certainly even let's use melancholy. because it will not work, but even that subsequent Limudat Torah, Pasha, to understand and to learn and to feel the godly energy in your subsequent Limudat Torah, it's important you do it with joy. So he said, say that Psalms right now, after Tikkun Chatzos, and again, Kidei, Kaidem Alimba, before you start learning, Kidei Lilmei B'Simcha Mitzvos, in order to learn Torah with true, authentic, genuine joy, or rather true, a genuine joy, Haba Achar Etzav, which comes subsequent to this bitterness. This joy has an advantage and virtue, like the virtue of light, which comes subsequent or consequent to darkness. Like it says in Zayar, al pasuk, it says in Zayar on the verse which Shlomo Melech said. Shlomo Melech said that I saw that there's a certain advantage of wisdom when it comes from sichlus, from foolishness, and he used the expression like the virtue of light, the way it comes from darkness. The literal meaning is that when do you appreciate light? You appreciate light when you experience darkness. That's when a person could appreciate light, or does appreciate light. When does a person appreciate wisdom? When there's an experience of foolishness, when there's an expression of foolishness. And then you can appreciate wisdom like anything else in life. And when you see the opposite of the good, and then you experience subsequently the good, which is the opposite of this which you're experiencing, like in this case, wisdom in contrast to foolishness, light in contrast to darkness, that's when you have the real appreciation. When you see the darkness, or you come into a room and it's pitch dark, and you know there's something very important in this room, or something you're looking for in this room, something interesting you in this room, and when it's dark, and all of a sudden someone opens the light, you appreciate the light so much more when you experience the darkness, much more than if you only had light in the first place. And similarly, when you see foolishness and you see wisdom, which comes consequent or subsequent to it, or behamshech, in continuation of it, then you can appreciate it. That's a simple meaning. But it has many, many different layers, this meaning as well. In this case, the Alter Rebbe says that the simcha, when a person experiences, like someone experiences a certain joy, after he has this hardship, a person has a court case, God forbid, and there's a struggle, and he sees, and it would cause a lot of worry, God forbid, worry and preoccupation and concern, and then he's alleviated, he's vindicated, he's alleviated from this, the verdict goes to, so the joy which comes out of that is much more than that experience, especially the first day or the first few moments in particular, that experience, that expression of that ecstasy, or that the unique joy which comes as subsequent or consequent to that chayshach, to the darkness, is something you cannot describe. You cannot compare it to when things are always good. So again, there's different ways of explaining this passage, but in this context, Alter Rebbe says this is what Arizal, or this is the message of B'chol Etzav Yemeiser. When a person has the ability to cry himself out, pour his heart out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'mar nafshi, with the bitterness of his soul, and with a broken heart, and then he takes it, and then again he says, he introduces this establishment of the Arizal to say the Mizmer after Tikkun Chatzos, because by Tikkun Chatzos he melted away. Again, when a person understands what the whole, based on all what Tikkun Chatzos is all about, he melts away in his tears and he weeps for the Galus HaShechina. And then after that, he changes the channel to joy, and he starts learning with that unique simcha. You cannot compare that simcha to a situation when he never entered or experienced that expression of tears and weeping and expression of bitterness of a soul and a broken heart. The simcha which comes behamshech lazeh, continuation of this, that's a very special simcha. So this is what the expression b'chol etzav yemeiser. That itself says that the etzav itself doesn't have that specific virtue. It is special on its own because that's the way a person brings down the partition between him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the main thing is Yiyeh Meiser, the joy which comes in continuation of that outside. Similar to what David HaMelech said, that the true appreciation of light is when it comes consequent to darkness, or behemshech, in continuation to darkness, and similarly the chachma, wisdom, which comes behemshech to sichlus, to foolishness. And finally over here, Alter Rebbe brings, literally, we have 2 lines over here to the end of today's class. Alter Rebbe brings a famous Arizal. Arizal says, translates the pasuk in Dvarim, in the final Chumash of Torah. The pasuk says, this is one of the techachot, the famous rebukes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is twice in the Torah. And sometimes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes down very hard, at least in his words. And he says that I gave you good times, and you didn't utilize the good times which I gave you to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you took advantage of it, and unfortunately as a result you have to face different types of times. So this is the simple meaning of the pasuk. Comes the Arizal and it explains this pasuk a little different. That it's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling the Jew, that you didn't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu when there was in times of simcha v'tuv, in times that you could experience joy. But the Arizal says the problem was, or that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was upset on the Jew that you served him. You did serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the pasuk is telling us the style how you served him. You served HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you didn't serve him with joy. You didn't serve him with gladness of heart, which is again a very different pasuk than the answer in the very beginning. The pasuk says that it's not that you didn't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the simple meaning of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that there was times and reasons for joy. The pasuk says you did serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on the Arizal's pirush, but you didn't serve him with joy. That itself upset HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kin v'neidol akel pirush Arizal pasuk ezeh al pasuk zeh. That the Arizal explains this pasuk, which tells us that what upset HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that we served him, but we didn't serve him with joy. Which this in itself tells us how crucial, how important it is not only to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but precisely to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing less than true simcha, true joy, and true gladness of heart on a constant, continuous basis. Have a wonderful evening.